The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
All right, we are heading into the belly of the beast. I guess that's not fair to say. I mean, let's be perfectly honest about Florida for one thing. When it comes to universities, yes, there's the Florida state side and then there's the UF side. And I've known plenty of people that have gone to both. And even though I graduated from one of the two, it just, something, it's all good. It's all good. I still have to rib on Gators every now and again. And I can't even say anything about sports because I literally have no clue how either team is doing this year. Or teams, it's not even one sport. It's many sports. Regardless, we're going to have some fun in Gainesville for the next couple of episodes of the Florida Beer Podcast. And that's what you are listening to now is the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. This is Dave, your host and author, and we are in Gainesville, Florida. Yes, home of the University of Florida, one of two universities that were started in the late 1800s. Obviously, if you don't know the story, the state provided funds for two colleges, one that was east of the Suwannee River and one that was west of the Suwannee River. The one west of the Suwannee River obviously became Florida State University, and the one east eventually became the University of Florida. And the rivalry commenced from there. So we've got a couple of episodes because both of these cities, while known primarily for their universities, and obviously Tallahassee has the state legislature, they also have small but mighty craft beer scenes. And I think Hogtown, kind of the nickname for Gainesville, probably has one that's I can't say that's a little bit bigger because they both have a couple breweries that are really, really big and you can find basically across the state. And they've got a couple that are pretty small and things that may have a good regional footprint or just something incredibly hyper local. We're going to be talking to one of the latter on this episode in terms of something that has a strong but regional footprint, and that is Cypress and Grove. Now, Cypress and Grove sounds like an intersection, and in fact, it was an intersection in Gainesville many, many, many years ago, probably 100 plus years ago, when the building that Cypress and Grove Brewing currently inhabits was opened as an ice plant. And what was great about that being an ice plant is that it was situated right over its own aquifer well. So they were able to draw up that fresh spring water directly into the plant, make the ice, and sell that to residents around town and beyond. It is currently sitting on the intersection of 10th Avenue and 4th Street, which is not quite as fun as Cypress and Grove is, but there's still a lot of history. And what's nice about Cypress and Grove is founder and owner Gary Heil was able to really try to celebrate as much of that as possible. And when you go into the brewery and into the tap room, they've kept it as authentic as they possibly could. It's absolutely fantastic. And so producer Steve and I are going to be chatting with Gary about the brewery, how important the city was and the history of the city was in opening and saving as much as they could. And obviously an absolutely killer lineup of beers that they have there, including one of my favorite rice lagers in the state of Florida. It is a fantastic place to go They have a very strong lineup of beers, a beautiful tap room. And what's nice about the kind of upstairs portion of the tap room is they have some beautiful picture windows out onto the brewing floor below. But enough listening to me. I have rambled way too much. We're going to be sitting with founder and owner of Cypress and Grove Brewing in Gainesville, Florida, Gary Heil, to talk about the brewery over a couple pints. Enjoy. I kind of want to start by talking not about the brewery, not about the building, as much as I want to talk about the area that we're in.
Okay.
Because this section of Gainesville, driving through, there is definitely what it used to be and what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it seems like people such as yourself, instead of removing what used to be and only putting in what is, you seem to be kind of trying to keep them both together.
Gainesville itself has a lot of history, and this part of town in particular, when we've tried to do as much research as we could and find what we could about this part of town, obviously the old Atlantic and Seaboard Railroad ran right out past us out here. Now it's the rail trail that runs through town. Creates a nice little non-motorized link to us and actually First Magnitude down at the other end of the rail trail on the south side of town.
So it gets that close to you?
Yeah, it runs right down past them, just within like a block of their place too. So the railroad played a big part of this, area of town. There was a lot of light industry here. This building in particular included in that, and a lot of the buildings around us were light industry associated with the railroad, either loading or unloading goods or light manufacturing then that was moved by rail. And so there's a lot of that history still here in some of the buildings and around here. All up the rail trail, there's buildings that you can find that, have had something to do with moving products on the rail here.
And it seems like, I guess, what used to be the old depot or station or something is now a food hall from what it...
Yeah, so there's a lot of that. So a lot of things have been repurposed and renovated, and, a lot of changes happened in the 70s and 80s and the first rounds of urban renewal, and so we've got a big strip mall to the east of us there with lots of stores and Publix and all that there, and a big giant parking lot that paved over the head of a spring that is the start of what's the creek? It's Sweetwater Branch Creek starts right under the Publix parking lot out
really?
there.
Really? Because is that the place where, because I was here about 5 years ago, and that was a Lucky's.
Oh, that's over
that's the other side. Okay, that's the other side.
So this just over here, over along Main Street, is Publix and that whole plaza. And somewhere underneath that parking lot is the spring head that starts the Sweetwater Branch Creek. So, which runs all the way down through to the south side of town and ends in the sheet flow down on the south side of town. So, but that little creek's been a part of this neighborhood and the Duck Pond neighborhood, which is where I live just over 5-6 blocks away. And it's always been a part of the community and that little kind of natural feature here. But so the rail trails kind of defined this area, or the railroad and the rail trail kind of defined this area before, and now it's still kind of a connection to this part of town along with other parts of town here. So our name comes from the historical street names for this neighborhood.
Because I was going to ask, I assumed Cypress and Grove. Oh, let's take a look at Google Maps and see, and it's not on Cypress, and it's not on Grove, and there's nowhere near an intersection. I just sort of assumed you would see kind of like the stereotypical Hollywood and Vine. You see the two. So no.
Yeah. So if you drive around this neighborhood, you'll notice the black and white street name signs here, and that is Gainesville's way of indicating this is a historical neighborhood. And so, and under the modern street names, there'll be the historical street name listed underneath on the bottom of that street sign. And so we're at the corner of what used to be Cypress Avenue, which is now 10th Avenue, and Grove Street, which is now 4th Street. And so this area is still known to this day as a Grove Street neighborhood. And so we've got, lots of people that associate Grove Street neighborhood, and the people that live here still associate this as the Grove Street neighborhood. So, and they talk about, I live on Grove Street, instead of 4th Street. So that's where we got our name from, because we wanted to give that link to the history of this neighborhood and this building, and that, we're part of this neighborhood. We're not, in some big giant industrial park on the edge of town that has no link to a neighborhood or to a community. And so, we pride ourselves on being, like the most walkable brewery in town. You could walk to us from four of the neatest old historical neighborhoods in town. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the building itself, because you clearly have a lot of. This building's been around,
yes,
shall we say?
Yes, it's been added to several times over early part of its life. Started out with the one upper brick tap room area that was originally built in the late 1800s. Was built as an original ice plant. An attempt to build an original ice plant here. Just back in that time, it was the transported goods from south to north, and the railway being able to transport produce and beef, which is big. Cattle grazing was big here in Florida at the time. Being able to transport those goods up the East Coast. So there was, I think, about every 60 miles they had to have an ice plant to replenish the ice in those cars before they had refrigerated cars. So they attempted to build one here because they thought, that's like liquid gold, frozen gold. If you could make ice, you could sell it because there's a demand for it. That first company that settled in here wasn't very successful, even though it was called the Success Ice Company. They were not very successful.
So the name was the Success Ice Company, and they failed.
And so that business sold. That business sold out in 1903 to another gentleman whose name escapes me at this moment. I apologize, but he acquired the building with plans to modernize it to more efficient equipment and what they call a can plant, which is basically big metal cans you fill with water, submerge into a bath of freezing cold brine, chilled by compressed ammonia, and would run 24/7, producing 30 tons a day. It was a 30-ton can plant, it's referred to.
That seems like it would be sort of an environmental wasteland with giant vats of ammonia.
Well, it was all contained, so it's just like modern refrigeration. I'm sure there were leaks, but I could show you some of the old turn-of-the-century equipment that we have still down there. Some tanks, some of the condensate return tanks that look like they were hand-forged, and hand-forged rivets on them and stuff. So I'm sure there were some leaks. But, the nice thing about ammonia, if you got a leak, you know it. So you'll miss it pretty quick. But that was pretty common then. That was the most common modern refrigerant, to be able to compress. At that time, it took really big equipment that wasn't portable or, small enough that you could put in your home or, easily put on a mobile, like a train car or something like that. But these big compressors would compress the ammonia down to liquid and pump it through piping through the brine bath and chill it down very, very cold. And I think from what I've read, these can plants, the way they worked, it took about 24 hours to freeze a 300-pound can of ice. And so they had a swimming pool, Olympic-sized swimming pool full of brine that they would essentially keep cold. And guys worked 24/7, pull one can, pull the ice out of it, move it into the cooler, fill it back up, put it back in, move to the next one, and just move through hundreds of these cans through the swimming pool 24/7. And they did that here from 1906 until about 1975. So
that late?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so we didn't, if you think about it, well, I'm old enough to remember not seeing bagged cube ice or tube ice in the grocery store when I was a kid. And a lot of the people here that grew up here in Gainesville remember coming here with parents and grandparents. If they needed ice to go to the beach or go fishing, they stopped here with their cooler and they got their ice.
That's amazing.
So that's if you needed ice for something, that's where you got it. So yeah.
So obviously they stopped operation in 1975. Was there anybody else in this location before Cypress and Grove started?
Yeah, this building got a lot of neglect in that time after it closed the ice plant. It got used by a few businesses, mostly for storage. One gentleman who owned quite a bit of property here converted it over to storage for his classic car collection. Yeah, so basically kept the roofs intact, did a little bit of repairs on things. And then another business owner, the land clearing business, owned it. At one point there was someone living here in this building. The owner of the business was living here, had an apartment in what's now our office upstairs in the mezzanine. And but the building wasn't taken very good care of. And because It was added to like a couple different times. Like our event space was added in, I think, the 20s or 30s, and was actually a separate business from the ice plant. It was actually a meat packing, a commercial wholesale meat packing business that brought in, halves of beef and did custom cuts and supplied restaurants and most of the fraternities on campus here at UF. And so they ran out of that north, and they basically used the coolers though and the ice to keep the beef cold while they had it on premise. So. But yeah, so that was added, and the roofs weren't exactly tied together to shed water very efficiently and appropriately, and so yeah, things went downhill after a few years on the roof. So we've done our best to try to make them work, and ended up having to completely replace the roof on what's now our production area.
Gotcha.
Basically built a metal building inside the walls of the old ice plant. And sloped the roof all in one direction instead of most of the water coming back towards the middle of the building, which was a problem. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems that, I guess we'll talk about the building and then we'll talk about, well, actually, no, let's go back. Cypress and Grove, a brewery. Why did you decide that Gainesville needed another brewery, and why? Obviously, I would assume from an aesthetic standpoint, you can't beat a location like this.
Yeah.
From a physical standpoint, you can very easily beat a location like this. So I guess what was the impetus to create another brewery here in Gainesville, and why did the Success Ice Plant fit the bill to be the home?
At the time we started planning this brewery, there were only two other breweries in Gainesville. So Swamphead and First Magnitude.
Okay, gotcha.
So First Magnitude.
And Blackadder had not opened yet.
He was in planning, I think, at about the same time we were.
Okay.
He opened about 7 months before we did, December,
Gotcha.
and we opened in August of the following year. Mm-hmm. And then, there was a little microbrewery downtown, Tall Paul's, Alligator Brewing Company, was a little one-barrel system, brew pub.
Was that the place that eventually became Big Top Gainesville?
No. So Big Top came in just shortly before the pandemic, and that was a branch location of their brewery in Sarasota.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was actually just about a block and a half away from where Big Top's location was.
And that was literally the brew system that was like behind the bar glass wall, right?
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
That's what I was telling you about the other night.
Nice.
And so since then, I've heard of, since we started planning, there were probably 3 other breweries that at one point or another were in planning but have never reached fruition. A lot of it because there's not really a lot of good locations to put a brewery in Gainesville. So it's been hard. I think there's one more in planning right now that's going to go in the area just on the south part of downtown, north of Depot Park. And that's somebody who actually used to brew for First Magnitude, had a brewery in Tampa.
Went to 8-1.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't 8-1. Yeah, it was Bay Cannon. I'm sorry. He was at Bay Cannon.
Yeah, and now he's moving back up here to get out of Tampa. But why did we think that we needed another brewery in Gainesville? Good question.
Because I will be perfectly honest with you, and we will get back to the building a little bit later on. There are 2 cities in Florida where there is a very definite immediate college that jumps to mind when you say the names.
Yep.
Gainesville and Tallahassee. Both of those cities in the past several years have grown small but mighty craft beer scenes. And I would almost say that they kind of came up together but are still separate enough to be distinct.
Yep.
And obviously, the giants here being First Mag and Swamphead. Over there, you've got Ology and Proof. But when you think about a college town and you think about a college person, craft beer, traditionally, at least when I went to school, beer was how much, how cheap, how fast can you put it down your gullet?
Exactly.
Has the college craft beer drinker changed? We'll talk about the Gainesville, a full-time resident like yourself a little bit later, but obviously a lot of the income and a lot of the economic power is going to come from the kids.
Yeah. A big part of our clientele, patrons, whatever you want to call it, probably don't come from the undergraduate college crowd, but because
I got you there.
But because the University of Florida also has a vet school, a law school, a medical school, a dental school, a pharmacy school, a nursing school. We've got all these professional age, so mid-20s and up, and then plus we've got the hospital, which has hundreds of young residents and doctors, quite a bit of people in the upper middle income bracket. So a lot of disposable income in that age range where, they're interested in more than just cheap and fast. So
you're absolutely right. That is absolutely the demographic.
And that was one of the factors probably in us, realizing this town can definitely support more than 2 breweries, probably more than 4 or 5 breweries, and at this point we've got 4, we've had 5, as many as 6 going at once here in town, and we've just continually seen increased sales over the years that we've been open. So.
But do you notice an ebb and flow to the season when the college is in and when it's out?
Yeah, this month, June and July, you ask any of the breweries, June and July is like the hardest months for us. It's summer. And it also, for us, a lot of it, too, goes with the public school calendar. Because when kids are in school, everybody's in town, and so they go out on the weekends and evenings. But as soon as the kids are not in school, they take off on vacation.
Yeah.
And so, June and July, there's no public school. It's either kids are in camp or folks are on vacation with them. And we see that as soon as 1st of June hits, boom, it's just dead,
And I was going to say, because with the Gainesville resident, with the full-time, full year, this is our home, what group of them, or was there a group that Cypress and Grove was a natural fit for as well? People like you.
I mean, I don't know the crowds that hit the other breweries that well and what their demographics are. But for us, because we're in these neighborhoods, we get a lot of our regulars are from our neighborhoods that are nearby that either walk or bike or just a few blocks away from us that hit us, several times a week probably. And then we have, a lot of people, a lot of people associated with the university that come here. We get a lot because we have such a large indoor event space and we have a private rentable event space. We get a lot of parties and events scheduled through the university, through groups from the university and other community groups. So it's definitely a little bit, I think it's a little bit older crowd than what you think of typically as your typical craft brewery, at least for us.
Yeah, it seems like you're very much focused on the community just to build up the community. And you are very lucky in that you have this space to where you can do that. Was that something that Gainesville was appreciative of, to have sort of a community location where they could, hey, let's get together in the Kiwanis Club or something. Meet.
I definitely think that's the case, and that's something that we wanted to kind of strive with this place and provide with this place, was a community meeting place, a place where, because we are a part of these neighborhoods and we are right here in the smack dab in the middle of a bunch of residential areas, we wanted to make sure that we provided a place that was an asset to them and not, a liability or, a pain in their ass. So we were very sensitive about what we did, but yeah, definitely we've heard from numerous people that they consider us their neighborhood hangout, and so this is the place where when they have friends and family come over, this is where they come and meet their friends and meet their neighbors. And we host, every Monday we host a local farmer's market here, which turns our normally dead day into one of our best days of our week.
And to have a farmer's market on a Monday, is because they're usually Saturdays or Sundays. Exactly. So I'm sure,
And so that's every Monday evening. Rain or shine, regardless if it's a holiday or otherwise, we've got it going on here, and it definitely brings in people from all over the neighborhood that come here for that. So. But yeah, definitely being a good neighbor and being an asset to our neighborhood and our community, that's forefront in everything we try to do. So
that's amazing. So you've got the location. I would assume that having been an ice plant, something like drainage would be relatively good, and something like electrical, maybe not so much.
Yeah, we redid 100% electrical in this building because it was, we had to have a new transformer. Had GRU put in a new transformer for us to supply us with the 400 amp service that we needed. And we basically took out all of the old flooring that was in the brewery. What's our production space was the ice production space, and had to put in slope floors and trench drains and all that. So all the plumbing's brand new, except there might be some original plumbing in some bathrooms, some old copper pipe from the 60s or 50s, but otherwise pretty much everything's Brand new. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So all the infrastructure, at least, anyway. So yeah.
Obviously, there a lot of the walls, especially the brick wall that Steve you're sitting in front of, is very, very. It looks like it has not been touched for the most part.
So a lot of this, the wall you see here, has the mastic on it. So this wall where we're sitting was actually one of the parts of the coolers where ice was stored. And you can see some mastic still on the walls here where there was about 4 to 6 inches of vitrified cork glued to the walls, and that was the insulation for these walls. The floor that we're sitting on is a floating slab of concrete sitting on top of 4 inches of cork, and then another 4-inch slab of concrete underneath that. And that was, there was probably about 4,000 to 5,000 square feet of cooler space in here where they were either storing ice or storing meat, because they also served as cold storage because you had all this ice stored and stacked in coolers. So they also rented out lockers for people to store meat and things like that. They smoked. So this room that we're in now was also used, the east 2/3 of it was used as an area where they smoked meat. And there was another area in the back, a cooler in the back, where they cold smoked hams and stuff. So Dudley Farms, which is a historical hog farm here in Gainesville, we found records when we were doing demo work in one of the old offices of the building where they were bringing 700-800 pounds of hams a week here to be smoked.
That's amazing.
It was really interesting. So it's just a lot of things going on in this space. But so the one interesting thing that this building had in terms of infrastructure that made this site, despite all the work that it needed done on it, very appealing to us, is that it has its own well. So we're one of the only brewery that I know of. There may be another one or two in Florida that has its own well, but we're the only one that I know of that has its own well that taps all the way into the Floridan aquifer. So it goes down 386 feet into the Floridan aquifer. It was originally one of the 5 wells that the city used for the city water supply. So that were located in a kind of the periphery of near downtown. Since that's moved out north of town to the Murphy Well Field, where the city has all their wells out there now. But the well's still there. It's still intact. We did our due diligence on it, ran a camera all the way down it to the bottom to make sure that the bore was intact and that the casing was intact, redeveloped the well, pulled out a 5,000 gallon per minute pump, which was the original pump in there, and about 7,000 pounds of steel, and put in a 25 gallon per minute pump down to about 125, 150 feet. And had a local company here put in a water treatment system for that. And we've been using all that water for our brewing water ever since we opened. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's quite the operation. So,
gosh. Well, okay, so you've got the water and you've got the location. What kind of toys are you playing with? What kind of toys are you playing with?
Okay, so we
as we take a look in the event space, which has a couple beautiful picture windows onto your production floor, I must say.
So we brew on a 3-vessel, 15-barrel Minnetonka Brewing and Equipment Company brew house. It's a mash lauter combination vessel, dedicated boil kettle with an internal calandria, and a standalone independent whirlpool. So it's because the calandria in our boil kettle doesn't allow us to whirlpool in the boil kettle, so we have a standalone whirlpool for that. All steam fired, steam heated mash tun and boil kettle. And then currently right now we have how many barrel of cellar capacity do we have right now? I'm trying to think. We just added some tanks this last year in May. We added 3 new tanks, a new 30-barrel production tank and 2 7-barrels, which give us some flexibility to do some fun stuff in the tap room. But otherwise we started out originally with 2 30-barrel fermenters, 2 15-barrel fermenters, and then a 15-barrel bright and a 30-barrel bright. In the last year and a half, we've added a canning line, which you just upgraded this spring.
Yeah, I was going to say, the canning line is kind of interesting, and I see that you're in stores around Gainesville.
Yeah. So we recently had a little switch over in our distribution this spring when Burkhart decided they were, ready to get out of the industry. And so right now, currently our main distributor is Tri-Eagle Distributing out of Ocala, Orlando area, and they cover pretty much the whole northwest corner of the state, all the Gulf Coast up to Tallahassee and a good chunk of the Panhandle, and then all the way down to Ocala, and I think just a north part of the Villages. So pretty much the west half of the north corner of the state. So we're still trying to get back in because Burkhart originally covered St. Augustine for us, and we're still trying to get back into that market because that's all still up in the air. But yeah, so we're distributing up in Tallahassee. I know we've got several places up there that have quite a bit of our beer. We're in Cedar Key, over in that area, and a lot of rural areas in there. There's not a lot of craft beer moving, but we are moving up towards the Panhandle a bit now, just in the past few months. And then quite a bit of beer going down to Pekala now, which we've been really wanting to get into. That being so close, and a lot of folks come up here to Gainesville and know us well, that have been wanting to get our beer down there for quite some time. So yeah, we've got quite a few accounts here in town, so a lot of cans around town. So,
and I kind of want to mention the beer for a little bit. Obviously, I don't generally go into specific beers, only because you never know what's going to be on tap. But one of the things that you mentioned, and it makes a lot of sense when looking at your tap list the day that we're visiting, is that you are a brewery that loves to do lagers.
Yes,
you're drinking a lager. I'm drinking a lager. Steve, are you drinking a lager? Steve is drinking a lager. So we're all drinking lagers, which is for craft breweries kind of an expensive proposition because you can't ferment as much liquid for obvious reasons.
It's definitely part of the equation. You got to calculate it in that tank time and how many tank days you can get on a beer. So it definitely plays into the equipment equation. Tying up equipment for a little extra time. Luckily, we're a little bit over a capacity in terms of what our equipment capacity is right now for what we're needing in terms of what distribution demands are and what our sales are. So it buys us a little bit of time. We added that extra 30 this last year, which bought us some space. So a lot of our production beer that's going out of distribution, we're moving in that 30s. We also are using some brewing techniques with yeast that allows us to ferment lagers in about 3 weeks. So we're using a high-pressure lager yeast that we ferment under 1 bar of pressure, and we can do that at warmer temperatures then, and it still forces the yeast to ferment with very low esters, and you get a really nice crisp clean lager. So that rice lager that you're drinking there, Steve, is brewed with that beer. So it makes a really nice crisp clean lager. Doesn't accentuate a lot of the malt in it, but on a light lager like that, there's not a lot that you're trying to accentuate it anyway, other than just nice, crisp, clean flavors. So, but it works well for us. So we can turn around lagers, in 3 weeks with that, and we've made good use of that. We do use some traditional lager yeast as well. So like I said, we were talking earlier about what we've got in process right now. We've got a German kind of fest style Helles that we've been lagering for about 4 or 5 weeks already now. So that'll probably go out to 6 or 7 weeks to lager. And then we'll package quite a bit of that. So we've got a Kolsch going right now that we're lagering for about 3 weeks, and then going to split that batch and do some fruit and some of it too. So yeah, it does definitely play into the equation, but luckily we've got a little bit of room to wiggle room to play around with it right now. It might change in the future. I don't know. We'll see. We've talked about getting some lagering tanks and putting unjacketed lager tanks and putting them in our cooler, but we're really tight on cooler space too now. So with all the distribution we're doing, so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where we end up with that. But
just move those smoked hams, or the ghost of the smoked hams, out of the cooler, and that'd be perfect. I was going to ask, was the interest in lagers also in small part due to the demographics of the surrounding area? Because I've noticed that, if we've got a beer drinker who's not a craft beer drinker, they tend to be wanting lagers, something similar to the lager that they've been drinking.
Initially, our interest in lagers come from me. I love lagers. So I am mostly German, like 5th generation German immigrant. My 5th great grandfather who immigrated to the States, the first job he got in the States after he got off the boat in New Jersey was he went to Philadelphia or somewhere in Pennsylvania and got a job at a brewery. And almost every generation of my family has brewed since then, home brewing, winemaking, a little bit of bootlegging during Prohibition.
But you didn't hear that on this show.
So, and my wife's grandfather also had a little bit of brewing in his background too. He actually was a tank driver in World War II and got there a little late in the war because of a clerical error in tank school. So he missed out on all the fun of D-Day and the Battle of the Bulge, but got in for the last push into Germany and ended up in Munich, where most of the U.S. troops ended up at the end of the war. and had to stay a little bit longer because he didn't have combat days to go back home at the end. So he got put into the Reconstruction government, and his job was to basically make sure that Hofbrauhaus in Munich was supplied with everything they needed to get up and running again. So yes. So he developed a love for German beer and a lot of things European at that time, and came back and at some point started home brewing himself. And he kind of got me inspired to start home brewing again, and so that's my wife. At next year for Christmas, my wife got me my first homebrew kit, and
it's amazing how many times I've heard.
My girlfriend at the time, fiance at the time, got me my first homebrew kit, and I started brewing, and it's just been downhill ever since.
It's amazing how often I've heard that story.
I know.
My wife, girlfriend, significant other got me my homebrew kit. I guess what's next for Cypress and Grove? Where are we going with this? So I know you just started.
We're chugging and plugging, trying to keep our heads above water and trying to stay ahead of all the changes in the market. The last 4 years have been a crazy dance, just trying to keep up with all the changes. It's just constantly something new coming at us. So, yeah, that and, we're getting at the point now where some of our equipment's starting to age. So we've got a chiller that's running on half a leg right now. So got a new compressor en route. Hopefully it's here in the next day or so.
Yeah, you were telling me that it's got to be difficult to own a business with a location that obviously needed a lot of TLC, but you've also got a lot of equipment that needs a lot of TLC. Yeah. Not saying that the equipment's old, it's just getting used.
Yeah. So we spent 2 years, rebuilding this building and trying to get it to where it was usable, and then, another 6 months getting the brewery up and going and running, figuring out that side of the business. And the building still needs a lot of work. There's still a lot of parts of it that we want to finish out and make a little nicer and more usable, more comfortable for our guests, more efficient for our employees and that kind of thing. So there's always just tons of stuff that we want to do. We've got big ideas and plans to, like I said, finish renovating this upper tap room space. We've got a bar up here with 40 taps on it that eventually someday we hope to have at least 30 beers on tap up here. We currently have we typically down on our downstairs bar, out of that little tiny cooler, we run anywhere from 20 to 25 beers on tap most days. And so we'll expand that up here once we get up here, running a long draft system out of our big cooler, so a little bit more room for kegs and stuff. But yeah, expansion, making our yard a little more appealing, making our entrance a little more noticeable. Right now, our address goes to the other side of our building, which kind of looks a little bit like not much different than it looked 7 years ago before we bought the place, when it was pretty run down. But that's our service entrance side back there. So it's not been a lot of work on trying to dress it up, but we're working on that. We're probably looking at some more equipment expansions for cellar capacity within the next year or so, depending on how our distribution market goes. But we've been seeing consistent growth in our taproom sales. We've been seeing consistent growth in our distribution sales. So we're looking to easily top 1,000 barrel this year. So, which is probably about 15-20% over what we did last year.
And is most of that staying here in the tap room, or is that most of that going to distro?
Probably about 60% tap room. So, and that's where last year we were about 60% tap room, 40% distribution. I'd really prefer that was 75-25, but you do what you can. So, profit margin in the tap room just drives everything. So, but yeah, so we're just trying to keep the diversity of beers out. We do, aside from the lagers, we usually have 4 to 5 lagers on draft at any time in the tap room, but we also have a great selection of hazy IPAs and West Coast IPAs and pale ales, and we try to have something for everybody. And we get compliments on the number of light kind of offerings that we have, which is great. We're thinking about trying to get our license to make cider. We've been working on trying to do that here lately, just so we're not paying for the profit margin on that. It's rather than seeing that money go into somebody else, we could bring a little bit more cash in, because we move quite a bit of cider through the tap room.
Interesting.
As a gluten-free option. So we have a large selection of wine too. So we just try to make sure we've got something for everybody, so we get as broad an audience here as we can get, and that's what we're just trying to keep moving. So just trying to find ways to make it work and more efficient, and hopefully make us a little more money. So
it's amazing. And I was trying to think, and I don't think Alachua, Marion counties have a cidery, have something like that. It's usually shipped from other places in the state.
We've got one local-ish cidery they're somewhere near here. I can't remember where they're out of right now. We've had them on as a guest tap occasionally. But yeah, there's not a lot. There was another guy over I think it was Inverness or somewhere near here that was doing cidery for a while, and then he didn't last. But I think First Magnitude has been making their own cider for a little while now, and it's just a matter of you see that money, where the money's going, and why it's not that much. You use the same equipment. You just have to have the license to do it. So
I was going to say, especially since I know ciders have to be technically separated in terms of production from the brew space, but you've got plenty of space.
Yeah. And so basically the way it has to be done, it's kind of a technicality. You just basically hang a tag on the tank that says this is our cidery today. So, and that's it. So, or put a rope around it that designates that part of the brewery while that cider's in that tank is the cidery. So.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Has the city of Gainesville and obviously Alachua County been good, not just opening the brewery, but as you kind of kick the tires on a cidery as well? Because I guess you were sort of lucky in that you were not the first ones.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to educate them as you went along.
Yeah, we haven't had too much in terms of licensing and that from the city. We haven't had too much trouble from them. They with their experience with dealing with swamp head in terms of utilities and wastewater and all of that, they kind of knew what to expect. And so at the volume 2 that we're producing, they haven't been too concerned about our operation. Knock on wood, that continues. Never know. But in terms of like support for small businesses, it's not been as good as what we'd expected or hoped for. Especially, in a neighborhood, there wasn't a whole lot of businesses in this neighborhood contributing to the tax base when we purchased this property and moved in here and started work. Since then, now there are, at least 7 or 8 new businesses within 2 blocks of us and more coming all the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, it almost seems like when you bought this location, because of where it was, because of what it was, it would have been a lot cheaper to do it when you did it than if you were to try to do it now.
Absolutely.
I feel like property values, especially for an old historic building, would have skyrocketed.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we got a pretty good deal on this building. If we'd have been a little quicker and known it was for sale a few weeks earlier, we probably could have gotten it from the original person who was selling it a little cheaper. But we got a pretty good deal on it. But like I said, we had to put a lot into it to get it to usable state. So. But yeah, definitely, I would not want to try to get into the commercial real estate business at this point. So
it's nuts. And then I kind of wanted to talk about Alachua County as well, because Visit Gainesville and Alachua County are doing the Sipping 7, which is funny because there aren't 7 anymore, but there will be 7 again.
Right.
With that free ale trail, which hopefully I will be completing today, fingers crossed, knock on wood. Has that done well to bring people in? Are you seeing a lot of people like Steve and I have been doing to let's just go down the trail and let's go visit everybody?
I haven't heard of, people coming in specifically because of that, but I'm sure, any publicity we can get and get, name recognition and people knowing that we're here helps for sure. I mean, Gainesville itself is a very diverse and very spread out community. I mean, it stretches way out on the west side, all the way out to, Newberry and that direction, and all the way up to Alachua. And so there's people that, out on the west side that very, very rarely venture this side of 34th, if even that far, very, very, very rarely venture any farther than the university. And so getting them to come to the east side of town is sometimes an effort. And so, or even just getting them to know that we're here. So I remember for the first 2 or 3 years, we'd go to beer festivals and other events, and we'd get people that were lifelong Gainesville residents go, "Where are you guys at? Where are you guys at?" And I was like, "You kidding me, really?" So, but we don't get that much anymore. So I think the message is finally out there. People know we're here. And so we don't get that nearly as often as we used to, thankfully. But so somebody out there is getting our name out there. So I think the cans have helped. Getting the cans out in distribution helps always get you visible in a lot of places that you weren't before. We are in a lot of restaurants and things like that too. The cans help with that. So restaurants that don't have draft gets this out there, on consumption on premise locations. So that gets their name out there even more. So, and it's just a slow process. It's just kind of word of mouth and just putting yourself out there in as many places as you can be to be seen. So, but obviously the Alachua County and the groups there, the tourism groups have done a great part in trying to help us. I know they came and worked with us a lot, trying to promote us and let people know what things we had going on here. So yeah, we appreciate anybody who's willing to get out and shill for us.
Awesome. Well, it looks like you've got plenty more to grow and plenty more to go, which is awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys coming. It's great talking to you.
So, yes, there is a lot to consume from Cypress and Grove, not just in fantastic, flavorful beers, but in history and culture and location and so much more. It is definitely a place to go and to really, really enjoy. We're going to be staying in Gainesville for next week. We are not done with Hogtown just yet, but if you want to know when that episode is going to come out, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us. Obviously, if you're listening to this podcast on a podcasting app, hopefully you have already done that. And so you will be automatically notified when the next episodes come out. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at FL Beer Blog. If you're on Instagram or Threads or Twitter X, whatever it's being called right now, we are Florida Beer Blog. You can find us on the internet at floridabeerblog.com and floridabeerpodcast.com, or you can always email us at floridabeerblog@gmail.com. We are also a very proud member of the Florida Podcast Network, bringing you podcasts from across the state, made by and concerning things that are happening here in the Sunshine State. You can find them at floridapodcastnetwork.com. Remember, our next episode is coming up pretty soon, so make sure to keep your eyes peeled for that as we are sticking in Gainesville. Our intro announcer is Jeff Brozovich. Our field producer is Steve Pekala. Executive producer for the Florida Podcast Network in Grand High Poobah is Jemmy Legagneur. This is David Butler, your host and author. We will see you next week wearing orange and blue. Or garnet and gold. You never know. Anyways, drink Florida Craft.